Greetings all. The subject of my talk today is environment change is real. No, that didn't come out well. Let me give it another shot. Take 1. Environment change is real. Take 2. Environment change is real. Take 3. Environment change is real. Now, my acting skills aside, all I wanted to establish is that there are ways to read the topic of my session. And the state of our earth today, it should be a foregone conclusion without a doubt that environment change is indeed real. But let's look at what a contrarian would think like. Possibly call it fake, a myth, a fad, a hoax, a fallacy, or some sort of a delusion. Over the course of the next few minutes, I will try to unearth, pun intended, some of the live happenings around us. I will take a multi-dimensional approach, an approach that considers that one cannot be drawing conclusions without giving due consideration to everything happening around him or her. Let me present this to you and leave it to your own judgment and make your own decisions about your careers as you move forward in your future. Let us establish firstly what's happening with the planet today. And in order to do that, let me ask you to revisit your summers from about 15 years back. Take a moment to recall how the weather was back then. Now back to this year. How often do you hear from people saying that it is getting much hotter with each passing year? And it is not that the winters are any pleasant or the rains are any predictable. In fact, unpredictable is the word. The last 8 years have been the hottest ever experienced on this planet. And this is coming from European Union's Climate Monitoring Service, and that's a credible source. Let us take a moment to understand what this temperature rise could mean. Loss of livelihoods due to increased frequency of floods and intensity of storms, heat waves, droughts, forest fires, etc. Loss of biodiversity due to its impact on wildlife. Unpredictable water availability for all. It is this impact on Earth that we are increasingly witnessing on a daily basis. If the visuals that you may have imagined in your mind by now are real, then environment change cannot be fake. It is indeed real. There is a need to be nature positive in our approach, that is, living in harmony with nature. Let's explore another dimension to see how we notice country leaderships reacting to this. Every year, country leaders come together to discuss climate change at the Conference of Parties or the COPs. Over the years, the dialogues have moved from accepting the climate challenge to pledging goals for their respective countries called NDCs to identifying means and resources to meet the goals. Of late, there's an increased discussion, deliberation and debate on how should finances be arranged to deal with adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage and rehabilitation in the wake of increasing climate events. Within their countries, these leaderships are increasingly making climate and environmental stewardship an integral part of policy direction. Let me cite a few examples from India that have happened in the last 5 years or so. India has declared 2070 as their net zero year and has also submitted last year its revised NDCs or nationally determined contributions aligned with the Paris Agreement targeted at 2030. It has onboarded 123 sunshine abundant countries since 2016 for its international initiative to promote and deploy solar energy as an alternative to meet energy needs globally. This is the International Solar Alliance. India's planning body, Niti Aayog, recently announced a 5-year global mass movement for lifestyle for environment. The LIFE mission will be led by India all the way till the year 2027. Other countries have also made similar commitments towards addressing the climate challenge, depending on their regional context. These commitments vary, and understandably so, from the advanced economies to the emerging economies. These are being backed by policy shifts, regulatory interventions, support mechanisms to drive and aid the transition to scale. In India, the policy support for green hydrogen, solar energy, EPR, sustainability reporting, etc. stand out. These actions by country leaders should ascertain that the impact of environmental change hasn't been lost on the people at the highest level. To the contrary, if countries are directing a significant portion of their limited resources towards this, it clearly means that they acknowledge the gravity of the situation. It clearly means that environment change cannot be a myth, it is indeed real. Moving to another dimension, this one explores the views of the financial institutions including commercial banks, development banks, asset owners or managers, insurance companies, etc. These institutions manage and steer direction of the private sector because they control the inflow of financial resources that eventually help businesses grow. In the recent years, these institutions are increasingly applying non-financial factors as part of their analysis process to decide where their funds should be allotted. In fact, they have established a minimum criteria that companies should meet to qualify for investments. The realization is to the extent that the financial industry has come forward to create an industry-led partnership called PCAF, that is the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. The mission for PCAF is to facilitate financial industry alignment with the demands of climate change as captured in the 2015 Paris Agreement. Let's pause and understand what this means. For the financial institutions who control the steering wheel of the global economy to voluntarily draw criteria based on climate change that will eventually decide any enterprise's investor attractiveness should mean something. What it means is that there is a growing realization that climate risks could affect business operations in ways that haven't been completely foreseen, and so the investor community wants to play it safe and bet on companies that have accounted for these potential risks already. It also means there is a growing scrutiny on financial institutions and their funding direction, whether the funds are going towards a green economy enterprise or a brown economy enterprise. Just about a month back, HSBC announced that it will stop financing new oil and gas fields as part of its efforts to drive down global greenhouse gas emissions. You can clearly acknowledge that these are major decisions. Significant economic decisions like these clearly indicate that environmental change isn't a hoax. It is indeed real. Let us spice it up further with another dimension. This time, let us look at the future of the planet, the future workforce of the planet. We have heard it multiple times that the information today is available at the tap of a button, a click of a button. The new age workforce is extremely digital savvy and is well aware of what's happening around them. Research after research over the last 2 years have established how millennials and adults in Generation Z have an extremely passionate association with climate change. In fact, it has bothered them so much that it's leading to what is called climate anxiety amongst them. They of course are worried about the state of the planet. The Gen Z, that is people born after 1996, are also called the climate career generation. I believe most of you in the audience belong to this generation. The reason they are called so is twofold. One, they clearly identify climate change as one of their biggest concerns. And two, they're extremely careful and cautious to associate themselves with value-led brands much more than any other generation of the past. This is further ensuring that enterprises act responsibly to attract talent. To sum it up, we are talking of a generation that has information at the tip of its fingers. We are talking of a generation that speaks its mind out without hesitation. We are talking of a generation that is extremely aware and clear about what they want. And this Gen Z awakening means that environment change cannot be a fallacy. It is indeed real. Let us shift gears and look at the dimension of global initiatives. The United Nations is the de facto global organization that has the mantle of driving global good for the planet. They identify mega-scale programs that are better for the planet, people, and prosperity. We would all be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals that have been around since 2015. The 2030 Agenda for a Sustainable Development, adopted by United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 SDGs, which are an urgent call for action by all countries developed and developing in a global partnership. Among the 17 goals, the urgency associated with Goal 13, that is climate change, is exceptional. Recent research published in the UN IPCC report has declared code red for our planet, urging the world to cut its total emissions by 45% by 2030 to avoid climate catastrophe. This decade leading to 2030 has been identified as the decisive decade, or the decade of action, considering the significant stakes it has for the planet's future. Considering the impact climate change is having on the planet already, UN has launched an ongoing initiative called the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. In their own words, there has never been a more urgent need to revive damaged ecosystems than now. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration aims to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems on every continent and in every ocean. With the might behind the UN initiatives during this decade to address climate change and the scale of global efforts behind it, environmental change cannot be a delusion. It is indeed real. And the final dimension to consider is the emerging scene in the job market. The research reference I quote is the Global Green Skills Report published by LinkedIn in 2022. Let me present the prominent facts and figures mentioned in this report to establish the picture of the green job market. In 2019, the balance tipped towards green talent as the green hiring rate accelerated ahead of the overall hiring rate in most economies around the world. The share of green talent increased from 9.6% in 2015 to 13.3% in 2021. In the last 5 years, the number of renewables and environment jobs in the US has increased by a whopping 237%, in stark contrast to the 19% increase in oil and gas jobs. While job postings requiring green skills grew at 8% annually over the past 5 years, the share of green talent has grown at roughly 6% annually in the same period, unable to keep pace. Several of the fastest growing green skills across all sectors during the same time period were not necessarily in-demand skills, but suggest the emergence of new trends, including sustainable fashion, oil spill response, and sustainable business strategies, among others. Globally, millennials are leading with 13% compounded annual growth in green talent between 2015 and 2021. This represents an opportunity for newer generations to have a positive impact on greening the economy immediately. These facts clearly establish and demonstrate that the industry is opening up to sustainability skills. In fact, there is significant demand to be met. For businesses to be hiring sustainability skills, it clearly means that these responsible actions are seen to be resulting in significant economic sense in their medium-term or long-term roadmap, if not in the near term. This again establishes that environment change is not a fad, it is indeed real. With this all-round analysis, I hope you have enough rhyme and reason to draw your own conclusion. To top this, the 2023 Global Risks Report by World Economic Forum mentions that the failure to mitigate climate change is viewed as a severe short-term and long-term threat for which organizations are least prepared. This risk was compounded in 2022 by the temporary return to higher levels of fossil fuel dependence resulting from the Russia-Ukraine conflict and dozens of billion-dollar weather disasters that devastated many communities. 6 of the top 10 risks by severity in the long term relate to environment and climate change. The verdict is loud and clear. Environment change is real, and real. With that said, I believe I can now go back to working on my dramatics. Thank you for listening in.